In every office, there's that one person. You know who I mean. The quiet one. The one who keeps their head down, does their work, and melts into the background. At Omnicorp, that person was Ilara. For 5 years, she was the silent engine in the data analysis department, a ghost in the machine. Her desk was in a corner, far from the lively chatter of the sales team and the strategic huddles of the executives. She was good at her job, meticulously so, but she was invisible. Her colleagues barely knew her name, and her manager, Mr. Harrison, often walked past her desk without a second glance. Ilara had always been this way. Growing up, she was the kid who preferred books to playgrounds, observation to participation. She found comfort in the shadows, in the predictable rhythm of her own quiet world. This preference for comfort over courage defined her life. She'd see opportunities, new projects, chances to speak up in meetings. But a voice inside would always whisper, "Stay back. It's safer here." And she would listen. One Monday morning, the familiar hum of the office was replaced by a frantic, palpable tension. The news spread like wildfire. Omnicorp had been hit by a massive attack. A sophisticated piece of ransomware had encrypted the company's entire client database, grinding operations to a halt. The attackers demanded a hefty sum, threatening to wipe everything clean in 72 hours. Panic set in. The IT department was in lockdown. Executives were shouting into phones, and the rest of the staff huddled in anxious groups, whispering about the company's potential collapse. Mr. Harrison gathered his team, his face pale and strained. "We're facing an unprecedented crisis," he announced, his voice tight. "Our best security experts are on it, but they're struggling. This is an all-hands-on-deck situation. If anyone has any ideas, any at all, now is the time to speak up." He looked around the room, his gaze sweeping past Ilara as if she were part of the furniture. The room was silent, filled only with the sound of collective fear. Ilara's heart was pounding. She had been quietly analyzing the attack's digital signature since the news broke. It looked familiar, eerily similar to a niche experimental virus she had studied in a specialized cybersecurity course she took online in her spare time, a course she had never mentioned to anyone at work. She knew something. She saw a tiny, almost imperceptible flaw in the ransomware's code, a backdoor that the attackers had likely overlooked. This was her moment, a crossroads. The familiar voice of fear was screaming at her to stay quiet. "Don't make a fool of yourself," it hissed. "These are experts. What could you possibly know?" Her hands trembled. Her throat felt dry. It would be so easy to shrink back into her corner, to let the chaos unfold, to remain comfortable in her invisibility. But then she looked around at the worried faces of her colleagues, people who might lose their jobs. She thought about the company she had quietly served for 5 years. For the first time, the desire to help, the need to act, was stronger than the urge to hide. Courage over comfort, the phrase echoed in her mind. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Ilara stood up. The sudden movement drew a few surprised glances. Her voice was quiet at first, barely a whisper. "Mr. Harrison." He turned, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "What is it, Alara? We don't have time for—" "I think I know a way," she said, her voice gaining a little strength. "The encryption, it's based on the Chronos strain. It has a recursive key flaw. If we can isolate the initialization vector, we might be able to create a decryption key without paying the ransom." The room went dead silent. A few of the senior analysts stared at her, dumbfounded. Mr. Harrison blinked, processing her words. The technical jargon, coming from the quietest person in the room, was jarring. He was about to dismiss her, but something in her eyes, a focused intensity he'd never seen before, made him pause. "Explain," he said, his tone skeptical, but intrigued. Alara walked to the whiteboard, her steps feeling more confident with every inch. She picked up a marker, and her hand, which had been trembling just moments ago, was now steady. She began to draw diagrams, write lines of code, and explain the complex vulnerability with a clarity that captivated everyone. The ghost in the machine was suddenly a commanding presence. She wasn't just speaking, she was teaching. The fear was still there, a low hum in the background, but it was being drowned out by the thrill of her own competence. For the next 48 hours, Alara became the heart of the counter-operation. She worked tirelessly with the shell-shocked IT team, guiding them through the intricate process she had outlined. She barely slept, fueled by coffee and a newfound sense of purpose. She wasn't just an analyst anymore. She was a leader. People who had never spoken to her before were now looking at her with awe and respect, calling her name, asking for her input. Mr. Harrison was constantly by her side, not as a boss, but as an eager student. He saw in her a brilliant mind he had completely overlooked. Finally, with only hours to spare before the deadline, it happened. A single line of code was entered, a program ran, and one by one the encrypted files began to unlock. A wave of cheers erupted in the command center. They had done it. Alara had done it. She had saved the company. The following week, the CEO of Omnicorp held a company-wide meeting. He stood before everyone and recounted the story of the crisis and the unlikely hero who had emerged from the shadows. He called Alara to the stage. As she walked up, she was met with a thunderous standing ovation. It was a surreal moment. Just a week ago, these people barely knew she existed. Now they were chanting her name. Alara's brilliance saved this company, the CEO announced, but it was her courage that allowed that brilliance to shine. She chose to speak up when it would have been easier to stay silent. She chose courage over comfort. He then announced her promotion to the head of the newly formed Cybersecurity Strategy Division. Alara's life changed completely after that day. She was no longer invisible. She led a team. Her ideas were sought after, and her voice was one of the most respected in the company. But the biggest change wasn't the new title or the bigger office. It was internal. She had faced her deepest fear and discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. She learned that true comfort isn't found in hiding, but in the confidence that comes from facing your challenges head-on. Her story became a legend at Omnicorp, a reminder that heroes aren't always the loudest people in the room. Sometimes, they're the quiet ones, waiting for the right moment to let their courage eclipse their comfort. Elara's journey teaches us that the potential for greatness exists within all of us. It's often hidden, buried under layers of fear and self-doubt. But when we find the bravery to step out of the shadows, even when our knees are knocking, we can change not only our own lives, but the world around us. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more content that inspires. We'll see you in the next one.